let me first of all ask you about the announcement that you were making today about the LGBT fund and what's come out of it, what your results are.
We were finding that men between the age of 24 and 35 weren't getting tested, and obviously were infecting a lot of women, and so a huge jump and women's HIV rate going through the roof. And after we were in Durban, weren't we? And we were sitting in our suite with Ndaba Mandela, Nelson Mandela's grandson, and he said, you know, I come from a generation of men that don't really get tested.
And he also said the disease isn't relevant to my generation, which for Elton and me was a bit of a eureka moment because it's been so prevalent in our lives. But he said to the younger African man, he said it carries all of this baggage from where it's come from and all the stigma associated with what HIV meant in the 80s and the 90s. And we needed to kind of reposition it in a way that, you know, knowing your status and understanding your status was something to own with pride and with a sense of responsibility. And that was a bit of a eureka moment for us. And being a person background in marketing and advertising, that sounds like a rebranding challenge. And so we had our sort of direction from there, and started to pull the people together so that we could really understand what would motivate that group of young African men, and how to message to them in a way that you know made them feel comfortable and compelled to know their HIV status and manage their HIV status successfully.
And not feel afraid by their status.
So almost to make it cool to know what your status is.
No.
You know, we started off this conversation talking about, you know, we were there in the 80s, you know, we lost friends, and the number of changes that we've seen, but the one thing that doesn't seem to be changing as quickly is the stigma, and which comes back to this, and you've seen it, and with Russia and what's happened in the Crimea and what's happened in Eastern Europe and Central Asia.
Yeah. It's so frustrating because here we sit in Amsterdam. You've been to a lot of these things, and every 2 years we come here and we make a lot of progress, and people are getting more treatment and getting, you know, having a healthier life, but not enough is changing in the fact that not enough people are getting the drugs. The drugs are too expensive, in the case of PrEP, and also governments being homophobic, sending people underground, and the marginalized people in life are getting left behind. And of course our organization has always said no one gets left behind. So you come across this stigma. I'm sitting up there today and doing the Q&A and thinking, this is ridiculous. We have the drugs to stop this disease now. And all it takes is for Putin, Trump, Merkel, Macron, Trudeau to say, okay, the president of China, to say, right, let's do one great humanitarian thing. Let's just end this disease. They can do it like that. And that makes me so frustrated.
Well, you have infamously had run-ins with Putin over this, and now you've got Trump, who has himself tried to cut back the PEPFAR funding, and promoted Mike Pence, who has not covered himself in glory on gay rights. I mean, do you feel frustrated? Do you feel
there's a lot of imbalance and a lot of change in the world at the moment right now? It seems harder and harder to count on things sticking around for long periods of time. This is an issue for which we are particularly dedicated and passionate about. We're not Americans, so I don't feel it's our role to sit on the sidelines and criticize a foreign government, particularly the government of a country that's been particularly good and welcoming to us over the years. However, we are passionate about seeing the end of HIV/AIDS in our lifetime, and if laws that discriminate against LGBT people become worse, if access to health care, access to affordable medicines becomes a problem, those will set back the goal, the victories we can make in winning the fight against HIV/AIDS. So we're watching carefully and closely, so that if we see some big changes come along, or we see some commitments rolling back, then we have to step up and use the voice that we have.
And if that happens, I mean, you go to Washington, you go to the Senate, you go to Congress, and it's a truly bipartisan thing. The only thing that's bipartisan, and it works, and it's brought so many wonderful things to people who thought they were going to die globally.
Yeah, started under President Bush, who people thought would never step up to the plate and make the gesture that the American government did with PEPFAR, which was truly historic and a big game changer, continued under Obama and the Democrats. And to this moment, it continues still.
President Trump has the ability to say, I want to keep PEPFAR going, and I want to be the president that ended AIDS. And if he said that, I would back him up to the hill. And I don't care what he calls it. He can call it Trump-FAR, he can do whatever he does. But he has the ability to say, my predecessors, Republican predecessor was President George Bush. He instigated this PEPFAR, and it was a bipartisan thing. Then the Obamas took it for 8 years, and it continued. It's still continuing. But he has the ability to say, it will continue, and I can have the ability to become the president that ended AIDS. Who knows?
You must surely believe he's not going to do that.
Huh?
You must surely believe he's not going to do that.
Why? He's so irrational.
No, because he hasn't shown any interest in HIV/AIDS.
He hasn't cut anything.
He hasn't cut
There's
anything.
There's definitely issues in terms of the national department that exists within Washington. We're watching, we're waiting. When we see genuine things happen that will threaten and set us back, we are standing by. But there's so much criticism flying around the world at the moment right now that until there's something specifically tangible that we can point our finger on and say, look, we have the experience, we've been doing this for 25 years, we know what works, we know what we need to have in place in order to have continued success. This change that you're making or this cut that you're making is going to set us back.
And if it comes to having to have a dialogue with him, then I'll have a dialogue with him.
Have you ever had a discussion with him about this?
Yeah, he comes to my shows all the time.
He does.
Not since he was elected.
What you thought. I was going to ask you what you thought about Mike Pompeo allegedly giving a copy of Rocket Man
that's a piece
to.
of hearsay, I think.
You don't think it
I
happened?
take things like that with a complete pinch of salt,
Well,
and they make me giggle.
Well, I thought they credited you with smoothing the path towards denuclearization. I mean, what more?
Did you do that?
No. I don't think so.
I also wanted to ask you, just going back to this idea of the increasing criminalisation of anti-homosexual laws and so on, also about the criminalisation of people using drugs. And the two are now seem to be going hand in hand. Where do you stand on that?
Oh, I stand very angrily against it. We don't leave anyone behind. As I said, we support transgender people, people in prison, intravenous drug users, LGBT people, marginalised people. So anyone who gets marginalised stands completely against what this foundation stands for, and we don't do it. And so part of what we do in certain countries with the $5 million that we raised from our organisation and $5 million we got from PEPFAR, in countries that is happening, we try and help those marginalised people, and we get to them and we equip them
on a grassroots level, on a local community level, where people will at this initial stage feel safe and feel that they can connect in a way that they're supported and they're not going to be called out.
We get them needles, we get them phones, we get them talking to each other, and that's what we do from England, and it seems to work because then it gets a community going together, a bit like the gay community was in the 1960s. And they learn to fight for themselves, but you have to make sure that they know that we care about them and we know that we're angry about it. Anything like that makes me so angry. But the anger that I have inside me, I have to really kind of try and I have a big mouth, and I don't want to make those people's livelihoods or their existence any more difficult than it is at the moment.
You mean for what's happening for them in the country when you've left, when you've gone, when you're not talking?
But I always meet them when I go and find out what can we do for them, how can we help. We go there. Anne Aslett, who's the head of the AIDS Foundation, and Scott Campbell, who's head of the AIDS Foundation in America. In fact, we're merging the two together sooner or later. But we always meet the LGBT people and the AIDS people before I do a concert. It's the first thing I do.
And then in a place like Russia, Elton will make a statement from the stage,
Yeah.
where he will talk about the spirit in which he is received and the spirit in which he is welcomed. And, you know, having gone to Russia since 1979 and being greeted with open arms, he says, look, I'm an openly gay man. You've accepted me, you've accepted, you know, my music. You need to put that same spirit into your everyday lives. And when you go outside the walls of the stadium and when you interact with people, you know, let that whole spirit run through your day-to-day activities.
It's a thing as a musician that you can break down barriers like that. It's like being a sportsman or a musician seems to be able to bring people together. It's a common denominator. I did a concert outside of Russia, which is a Muslim population, and there were certain things online saying that protests online and that I shouldn't go. And I went, and it was one of the most incredible concerts I've ever done in my life. I've never been accepted so well and received such an amazing reception by mostly a Muslim audience. So, you know, for me, those stigmas and those barriers still, they exist, and I hate that they exist. But if I can go and make them any better, I will try and do so. But sometimes you do feel you're kicking, you know, against a brick wall.
But it's better to go and give the issue visibility and to give it humanity than it is to boycott and stay at home.
Yeah.
That doesn't help anybody on the ground there. And when we meet with the local people in Russia from the different LGBT groups, they say, please don't isolate us. That's exactly what they want. They want to push us into the shadows. They want to push us away. They want us to be forgotten about. If you come, you'll be embraced, you know, in a big, high-profile way, and you will keep the issue and the fact that we're still here and that we need to be treated with dignity, you know, very much alive.
And they need to know they're supported. They need to know they're supported.
You're talking about, you know, needle exchange programs and so on. Well, Russia specifically does not support needle exchange programs or the use of methadone or...
only a few years ago that happened. It was happening in America.
Yeah, it can change. It can change. The reality is, you know, where HIV/AIDS beds in and where it roots out. You have to get in and look after everybody. You can't make judgments. You can't make distinctions at all. And, you know, we've proven that, you know, harm reduction programs, needle exchange, are hugely successful at getting HIV transmission rates down.
And legalizing drugs?
Legalizing drugs is a very, very complicated issue, and I don't think I'm not so sure if I follow your line about criminalization of drugs and criminalization of LGBT people. I think the bigger issue that we're grappling with in our society at the moment, and the numbers are staggering, is addiction. And it's not necessarily addiction from criminalized drugs. It's addiction across the board, from overprescribing and people getting access to drugs that are highly, highly addictive. I think another issue where we need to address stigma and address humanity is in how we put our arms around people that are dealing with addiction, in the same way that we need to do that for people living with HIV/AIDS.
Actually, that's quite a nice segue, because this morning I was actually thinking about George Michael, and that's somebody who you put your arms around, I think, and tried to help.
I tried to put my arms around.
Tried to put your arms around and tried to help.
I try to help, but you can't help people who don't want to help themselves. I've learned that as an addict, and I'm 28 years clean and sober. When people told me, when I was using, that I was doing the wrong thing, I was so angry, and I just told them to go away, or actually stronger language than that. So I understand George's, you know, when I said a couple of things, and he did a whole page interview in Heat magazine saying I should shut up, and I understood what his reaction is. Addiction is a horrible thing. And 2 or 3 of our friends are mired in addiction at the moment. And there's nothing I've learned. There's nothing you can do till you actually say, okay, I'm going to do something about this. I need help. Yeah. It's very hard. It took me 16 years to say it. And I thought, but I know I'm intelligent. I know I have a problem, and I can go for 6 months without it, but it always got worse when I started back on it. And in the end of the day, addiction is a very serious problem, and it needs to be addressed by yourself, and you need help from people, whether it's in Alcoholics Anonymous or going to rehab, or just having the humility to say, I have a problem, I can't do this, can somebody help me?
And backing that up with the support of a community. That's
and
what
it really ties into the HIV thing as well. I mean, the fact that it's the same, you know, you need to help people, you need to put your arms around people, but unless people get tested themselves, they're going to go around spreading the disease. and unless people stop taking drugs and they'll ask for help and they stop, then their lives will get better. It's the same with people who are HIV positive once they know their status, and that's what we're doing with this program in Africa, and with Debbie Burks and us we'll be talking about later. Then it will empower young men to be able to say, okay, we'll get tested and we'll stop the infection rate of young women going up like that. So, you know, there's always some problem or other, but there's always a solution. There's always a bright light on the horizon. My frustration, as I said earlier to you, is that we don't need to be going through this frustration. We just need to have some decent human beings to say, all right, let's come together, as politicians and everything, let's get rid of this disease. Let's just get rid of it now. And it's been a problem, it's been an economic disaster for countries, and we don't need this. We've got malaria to deal with, we've got cancer to deal with, we've got diabetes to deal with, we've got opioid addiction to deal with. Let's just get rid of this. Another bloody headache, we can do it.
I mean, the coming together is interesting, and I apologise for bringing up the word Brexit. But I mean, one of the issues that has come up repeatedly about the Brexit negotiations is the impact on health and about cross-country cooperation on research and development and the development of drugs. Are you at all worried about that?
We haven't delved into that, to be perfectly honest with you. We have so many other bigger issues that we're looking at the moment, and I have to say, from my own perspective, just getting a clear view on what all the key issues in Brexit are, it's very, very difficult to grasp what it seems to be changing every single day.
It's like walking through Hampton Court Maze blindfold, being turned around 16 times and trying to find your way out. I don't think people in Britain were told the truth to start with. I don't think they knew exactly what they were voting for. They were promised something that was completely ridiculous and it wasn't economically viable. And then it's gotten so complicated now that I just don't know what's going on.
Well, can I recommend the Channel 4 News Brexit 1-minute guide each night?
We'll seek it out.
It's a very good graphic.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many issues being batted around with Brexit. It's really hard to, you know.
There's a new cereal called Brexit. You eat it and you throw up afterwards.
And on that note.